Hello again, everyone. I hope you're well. Today, as promised, I'm going to talk to you about the grid transfer process. You're going to see this process does take a little bit of time to set up, but once you get past that, you will hopefully find that this is going to save you time and it will actually make things easier for you because you'll have all of your proportions and your shapes all set up very accurately right at the beginning of your drawing. So, let's take a look at the grid transfer technique. You will first need to select a photo reference to work from. As we saw in our linear perspective unit, photographs can make drawing easier because they do the work of flattening three-dimensional reality into a two-dimensional image for you. The grid transfer method makes it even easier to draw photographs with a high degree of accuracy. Here's a photo I took of myself to use for this project. As you can see, I sat next to a window to give a nice sense of light. If you don't have dramatic highlights and shadows in your image, it's going to be more difficult to get that strong dramatic illusion of form and dimension in your image. So I would recommend trying to get good lighting, something like this. After selecting the image I want to use, my next steps are to convert the image to black and white and to crop the image. If you take the picture with your phone, you can easily do this in the editing mode. I'm going to take you through the steps that I took on my older iPhone, but you should be able to take the same exact steps on any phone or computer. First, I'm going to enter the editing mode and make sure that I'm in the light and color adjustments menu. Next, I'm going to find the saturation and slide it all the way to the left to drain the color from my image. To crop my image, I'm going to look for the crop and rotate adjustments icon in the bottom right, and then for the proportional cropping icon in the top right. For the grid transfer to work, we need our image to be the exact same proportions as our paper. Since our paper is either 18 by 24 inches or 9 by 12 inches, we want a 3 by 4 ratio image, so slide over until you find the 3 to 4 fixed ratio option. Make sure that you have a vertical format if you want the traditional portrait style framing. At this stage, you can also zoom in or slide over to get the exact composition you want. The next step is to draw a grid over your image. You could do this by printing it out and drawing a grid on top of it, but I discovered it's actually much easier if you use a free grid overlay website that allows you to upload your image, add a grid of your choice, and then download the gridded version of your image. This is the website I used, but it looked like there are a bunch of others that would also work. I selected the 2-inch grid option, which gives me a 9 by 12 grid. I also changed the grid line color to white so that I would be able to see the lines more clearly. This is what my final image ended up looking like. I'm a little worried that parts of my image are a little bit too dark for me to see the detail, so I decided to lighten up some of the shadows in Preview. You could also do this on your phone. To open up the shadows in my image in Preview, I'm going to find the Tools Adjust Color menu first. Once I do that, I'm going to look for the Shadows slider and see if I can slide that all the way to the right. That's going to really open up my shadows quite a bit. But in case I wanted to open up my shadows even more, what I could do is find the mid-tone slider that's in the histogram at the top of the image and slide it just a little bit to the left, and that would even lighten my image up more. So this is what my image ends up looking like. I do want to make the note that I am keeping those other darker and color versions of my image just in case I'm losing some detail in some of these versions that I wouldn't be able to see as clearly. Okay, now that my image is prepared, I'm ready to start drawing. You will need a piece of paper, a pencil, and a ruler. Notice that I'm using a pencil even though I'm going to ultimately do the drawing in chalk and charcoal because a pencil is easy to erase and doesn't smear. The other thing you may want or need is a longer straight edge. In this case, I'm going to use this because I don't have a long enough ruler to reach all the way across my paper. Next, I need to draw a grid on my paper that has the same number of squares as my prepared reference image. Since the gray tone paper is 19 by 24 inches, I'm going to draw a grid of 2 by 2 inch squares, and just ignore that extra 19th inch on one side. That will just be extra space that I'm adding to my composition. After I have marked every 2-inch increment on all 4 sides, ignoring that 1 inch on one side, I'm going to take my straight edge and connect each pair of measurements going all the way across the paper in both directions. And here's my final result. You should be able to see that row of 1 by 2 inch rectangles at the top of the paper. That's that extra space that I had mentioned earlier. I think that this 9 by 12 grid, which gives 108 squares, is just about the right size for this type of drawing. If you have less squares, it becomes much harder to draw the shapes inside each square as accurately. And while you could add more squares, I think too many starts to get a little bit confusing. If you did want to do an 18 by 24 grid, I would recommend adding a letter and number system of coordinates to the edges of your paper so that you don't accidentally draw things in the wrong place. You could even do this to our 9 by 12 grid if you wanted to. Just remember, if you are going to add coordinates, you need to add them to your source image as well. Okay, now for the fun part. To use this technique, draw contour lines to represent the edges of any shapes you see within each square that corresponds to the same square in the original image. To ensure that you are drawing your lines correctly, look for the abstract shapes within each square, both the positive space shapes and those corresponding negative space shapes. These ones look pretty good, but later in my drawing, I'm going to notice that one of my lines is not in the right place. Here I can erase and then redraw it, and when I do that, I get something that looks much better. So this method is what I did to complete the entire drawing. It took me about 15 minutes to measure and draw out my grid, and it only took me about 40 minutes to complete my outline sketch once I had that grid done. Something important that I want to mention is that I'm not only drawing prominent features like the outline of my head and my eyes and my nose and so on. I'm also drawing subtle features, so things like the edges of shadows or the edges of highlights that are on my face and my neck. If I sketch a lot of detail at this stage, and if I take care to make sure those details are accurate, I will be better able to focus my undivided attention on value at the next stage of the drawing. Go back and rewatch Tuesday's video for examples and tips of how I recommend approaching adding value to your portrait. Okay, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully this was helpful. Remember, if you're struggling getting those small details or getting the shapes in some of those squares just to be exactly right, you can always add more squares. You may need to really use that coordinate system to keep things straight if you do that, however. If you are working only in your sketchbooks, make sure we want to have at least 3 of these finished grid transfer drawings in there. For everyone, I do want you to keep sketching in your sketchbooks. Hopefully you can work on faces, work on noses and eyes and those sorts of things. But you can also be sketching other things that you want to draw just for fun. That would be fine. I will try to be posting on Canvas another assignment for you to drop some pictures of whatever progress you make by the end of this week, and I will try to give you feedback when that happens. Otherwise, I will see you guys soon. Take care.